Yes, the late great B.B. King. Yes, one of the great guitar players of all time. But we are back, smack dab, in the middle of issues and answers, and another story that bubbled up this week was the media constant, I want to say, attacking, the media sustained attack on the presidential campaign of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And so now he's in trouble for suggesting that chemicals in the water are impacting the sexuality of children. Okay, this is what is being applied. So now there's been a hit piece written on him that says, Democratic president candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has a history of reportedly sharing unfounded conspiracies that man-made chemicals in the environment could be making children gay or transgender and causing the feminization of boys and the masculinization of girls. Experts dispute the claim from Kennedy, an environmental lawyer and anti-vaccine activist. He is not an anti-vaccine activist. Let me just say that. He is anti-forcing people to take vaccines, and he's pro-safe vaccines. He just does not think that Big Pharma always does what they should do, their due diligence in protecting the public. And when it comes to vaccines, there's a big difference. He told CNN's K-File that his theories that sexual identification and gender confusion among children could be from their exposure to endocrine disruptors found in the environment that are completely unfounded. Again, this is CNN's spin on it. He said, I want to just pursue just one question on these, the other endocrine disruptors, because our children now, we're seeing these impacts that people suspect are very different than in ages past about sexual identification among children and sexual confusion, gender confusion. He said on his podcast last year in June, these kinds of issues that are very, very controversial today. Endocrine disruptors are chemicals that interfere with the body's hormones and endocrine systems, according to the EPA. These chemicals are found in pesticides and plastics. We talked about this before, PFAS. The PFAS that are in all of our plastics is why I've stopped using plastic bowls a long time ago. I only use glass Pyrex, personally, to heat things, especially to heat things up in the microwave. Okay? Whenever you heat up plastic, you are emitting toxic chemicals. And also, when you keep plastic bowls far too long, where they start to chip and they start to get worn out, you start to see the bowls and the Tupperware start to chip away. You got to get rid of it because you are ingesting those chemicals. But anyway, yeah, these chemicals are found in pesticides and plastics and can affect reproductive functions and increase the risk of obesity. Now, this is known. This is fact. This is not his opinion or anybody's opinion. This is fact, even though CNN and the mainstream media are making him out to be a crazy person for saying this. Now, Kennedy on multiple occasions misconstrued, from their perspective, endocrine disruptors studied ability to cause some male frogs to become female and produce viable eggs, suggesting that these chemicals could have similar effects on children and change their sexuality. CNN spoke to multiple experts who said there is no link between endocrine disruptors and children's gender and sexuality. Now, while sex in frogs is determined by environmental factors such as temperature and chemicals, Dr. Andrew Gore, professor of pharmacology and toxicology at University of Texas at Austin, said the sex of humans is determined at the moment of conception and cannot later be altered by endocrine disrupting chemicals. That's not what he said. Again, they're taking what he said out of context. He did not say people's sexes are being changed. He's saying the confusion about, but anyway, I'll get back to it. The baseless claim that chemicals, particularly in tap water, could turn people gay has gained popularity with conspiracy theorists over the years, with most memorably with conservative radio host Jones, who said the chemicals in water were turning the friggin' frogs gay. again, I'm going to play you, in a few minutes, I'm going to play you a scientist named Mr. Tyrone Hayes, a brother from Stanford University, who has been screaming this from the rooftops for over a decade now, for a long time, about the chemicals in our water and what it is doing to the sexuality of animals and the effects that it's having on our environment. But let's get back to the story. Okay. A Kennedy campaign spokesperson said that his remarks were being mischaracterized. I agree. He is not claiming that endocrine disruptors are the only main cause of gender dysphoria. He never said that. He is merely suggesting that given copious research on the effects on other vertebrates, this possibility deserves further research. Now, why would you be against further research? Why would you be against further research on all these things that are happening in our environment? Could it be that these companies are the ones funding CNN and ABC and NBC and CBS? We already know Big Pharma is funding all these companies, as I've talked about ad nauseum during this pandemic that we just got out of. But if you look at their sponsors are responsible for a lot of the endocrine disruptors that we are ingesting and breathing in and probably drinking as well. But anyway, let's get back to it. CNN's K-File reviewed dozens of appearances from Kennedy on both his podcast and other media in recent years, where he occasionally discussed the topic. Kennedy has been polling at around 19% among Democratic voters in his bid to challenge Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination. Now that is where the issue is right there. He's been polling around 20%. 20% among Democratic voters. Now, the Democrats have already said that they are completely shutting down any dissension within the Democratic Party. They are not going to allow Robert Kennedy Jr. or Marianne Williamson to debate Joe Biden at all. You're not allowed to challenge Joe Biden whatsoever. And so what the mainstream media is doing is that they are playing cover for Joe Biden. They are playing cover for Joe Biden. They want to justify the completely undemocratic Democratic Party that has already said that nobody gets to challenge Joe Biden, in spite of the fact that 70% of the public doesn't want Joe Biden to run for election in 2023. Nobody, in 2024, I'm sorry. Nobody wants Joe Biden to run. Nobody wants Joe Biden to run. The only reason he is running in 2024 is the same reason that he was running in 2020. Because they ain't got no one else that is suitable for the mainstream corporate Wall Street wing of the Democratic Party. Nobody who will make sure that the billionaires don't have to pay taxes, like we talked about in one of our last segments. Nobody to protect Wall Street. Nobody to protect Big Pharma. No one to expand the military-industrial complex and get us into World War III possibly. That's why they made sure Bernie was not the nominee. That's why they are making sure that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not the nominee. Now, Kennedy has made these comments multiple times in between March of 2022 and June 2023. He said, if you expose frogs to atrazine, male frogs that change their sex, they can actually bear young. They can lay eggs, fertilize eggs, he said in the June 2022 episode of his podcast. And so in the capacity of these chemicals that we are just raining down on our children right now to induce these very profound sexual changes in them is something that we need to be thinking about as a society. Who's not seeing this? Who's not seeing that there is something environmental going on in our society? Now, atrazine is one of the most common herbicides. It is an endocrine disruptor, though Gore said there is no link between these chemicals and gender and sexuality in humans. That's what they say. That's what they say now. Should I say that's what they're saying now? All he's saying is that we need to research this. He didn't say it was definitive. He just said we need to research this because we're seeing the effect that it's having on nature. Now, this scientist from Stanford, Mr. Tyrone Hayes, said something very similar about the effect on the environment and animals. This is from 2008. This is old. So we know these chemicals, the effects of these pesticides can have horrific effects on everything and everybody. But these companies have the money. So this is Dr. Hayes.
What's important for this talk, however, is that
from the Commonwealth Club.
The effects that we're talking about now are in adults. When we start to talk about early development, whether we're talking about amphibians or humans, the effects are much greater. What is a little bit of poison in an adult is a great amount of poison in a developing infant or even in a developing fetus. What's interesting now is there's discussions that women who breastfeed might have lower risk of breast cancer. And some of the discussions are that those lower risks might be because women who are breastfeeding are mobilizing those toxins from the breast by excreting it into the milk. But those toxins then, which are in the milk, are going into the developing infant. And the difficulty that we're faced with now, as Gina alluded to, is it's one thing to show an acute exposure and a problem, but much more difficult in humans to show that if I get breast cancer or prostate cancer at 50, that it's related to something that I was exposed to from my mother's milk, or it's related to something that I was exposed to in the uterus that came across the placenta. What's been very helpful in these areas are that we have rodent studies. We have rat studies, which they're mammals like us. They breastfeed like us. They carry their babies like us. And we're now seeing that, for example, atrazine exposure in rats leads to prostate cancer in the females when they're nursing and when they're pregnant, so it crosses a generation. We're seeing that atrazine causes hormone imbalances that lead to breast development problems in the daughters of rats that are exposed. And then those rats even have problems feeding their daughters because their breasts don't develop properly. So we're seeing in rats that we get problems in the grandchildren of exposed rats, 2 generations down. So the affected rat who has poor neural development and poor growth was never exposed to atrazine, his or her grandmother was. And what you'll often hear from the industry is, well, rats aren't people. I even saw this on Channel 7 just ran a news story, and there's a guy at Stanford saying, well, mice aren't men. But we've seen this already. We have a whole history. DES, which we now know DES causes vaginal cancers in the daughters of women who took it when they were pregnant. We know that DES, or diethylstilbestrol, causes uterine malformations in humans when the mothers were exposed, but we'd already shown that in rats. You can expose a rat and 1, 2, 3 generations down, you still see effects of DES. We already knew that in DDT it could cross the placenta and affect developing rats. And now in 2006, finally we have a study showing that women who are exposed to DDT before the age of 14 are more likely to develop breast cancer when they're 50 or 60 years old. So we already know that these rat models, and of course the other irony is that these companies use rat models when they're trying to get the chemicals on the market. But then when you find something negative, they argue, oh, it's just rats, it's just mice, it's not relative to humans. So my concern is raised for environmental health, because now we're seeing a global decline in amphibians, and I firmly believe that pesticides are playing a role in that decline, not the sole reason, but playing a role. And I firmly believe that what we're seeing in amphibians and what we can model in laboratory rodents is a warning about public health issues, because many of the developmental processes, many of the hormones are the same, And in particular, I think we need to be concerned about, I've often said with the atrazine issue that we need to take a stand, write to the EPA, write to Congress, and be proactive, not because of us. Essentially, we've already been exposed. And then when you're given the half-life of many of these chemicals, our children have already been exposed, and our grandchildren will likely be exposed. So the fight we're fighting now is really, if you look at what we're learning from rats, the fight we're fighting now is really for our grandchildren's grandchildren.
Wow. That is powerful stuff. That is Dr. Tyrone Hayes from Stanford. UC Berkeley, professor of biology. Tyrone Hayes talking about atrazine and these pesticides and these chemicals and the effects that they are having. So why are they so on RFK Jr.'s head? They used to love him. They used to love him. They used to love him when he talked about water. When he talked about the poisoning in our water, like in 2010, he gave this speech talking about the poisoning of our water and what needs to be done about it at the American Water Summit in Washington, D.C.
Removal of the past 8 years, these companies have flattened an area of the Appalachian 1.4 million acres, an area larger than the state of Delaware. They've cut down 500 of the biggest mountains in West Virginia and buried permanently, forever, 2,000 miles of America's rivers and streams, according to EPA. It's all illegal. You cannot in the United States dump rock debris and rubble and garbage into a waterway without a Clean Water Act permit. You can never get a permit to do such a thing. And we sued them. We won the lawsuit in front of a conservative Republican federal judge, Judge Charles Hayden. He said the same thing I said. He said it's all illegal. It's been illegal since day one. He enjoined all mountaintop mining. 2 days from when we got that decision, lobbyists for Peabody Coal and Massey Coal met in the back door of the Interior Department with Gail Norton's first deputy chief, Stephen J. Griles, who's now serving a 10.5-month jail sentence at the federal penitentiary, but too late for the mountaintops, because he was a former lobbyist for Massey and Peabody, and together they rewrote in a dark room in the Interior Department one word, the interpretation of a single word of the Clean Water Act, the definition of the word fill, to change 30 years of statutory interpretation and to effectively overrule Judge Hayden's decision and make it legal as it is today, not just in West Virginia, but every state in the country, to dump rock debris, rubble, garbage, any solid material into any waterway in the United States without a Clean Water Act permit. All you need today is a rubber stamp permit from the Corps of Engineers, which in some districts you can get over the telephone or through the mail. Whenever you see large-scale environmental injury to our water supply, you'll also see the subversion of democracy. You'll see the erosion of the public process, or the disappearance of the public process. You'll see the obscuring of transparency in government. You'll see the corruption of public officials. You'll see the capture of the agencies that are supposed to protect the rest of us from pollution. In other words, all the indices of democracy are eroded and subverted whenever you see pollution. What we have the capacity to do, and we could go either way with water issue, and I'm going to shut up now, but I just want to say this. We could go either way. We can do something that's really wrong, which is to try in our industries, because so many of us are involved, and I'm involved with this industry. I've got a couple of companies here that I think are the greatest things that could happen in the environment. One company, O-Star, that is here, that removes phosphorus from sewage treatment plants in ways so efficient you can sell it, and the sewer plant starts making money from mining phosphorus. It's an extraordinary product. But we have all these other products out there. But we can go two ways. We can do what they did in Cochabamba and try to privatize public water supply and make it feudalistic, oligarchical, and turn our water system into these kind of feudal kleptocracies and steal it from the public. Or we can do things that enhance democracy and benefit the people of our countries and other countries all around the globe. And these new technologies allow us to do wonderful, wonderful things. But those of you who are in these industries, I would ask you to look at that and look at what you're doing and say, is the path I'm going, is it going to make us a more democratic nation, or is it going to make us a less democratic nation? Because that's a moral obligation that we have as well.
Right. So again, that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talking about the water crisis. This is from 2010. And again, back in those days, the mainstream media had really no problem with him. They certainly weren't portraying him as some weird crackpot or anything. But as I've said time and time again here on this show, once you show that you are a threat to the corporate wing of the Democratic Party, it does not matter if you are a Democrat like Bernie Sanders or, AOC. It does not matter if you are a leftist like Cornel West or Jill Stein or any of these people. The media they're gonna kill you. They're gonna destroy you. They will make you out to be the biggest loon on the planet. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because he's doing so well against an incumbent president, 20%, and against a president who is very historically unpopular, over 70% don't want him to run again. He is being slandered. And so, and really anybody who is talking about these issues that affect all of us, like what's being put in our water, all of us are being slandered. And that's an issue. That's a problem. All right, folks, I got to go to my last break. When I come back, I got to mop up and get up on out of here. So please stay with us here on WLTH 1370 AM, My Country with Scott Cannon. The phone line shut down. We going home.